back, ladies and gentlemen, to another exciting edition of Transformers Reviews. Well, everybody, today I was actually thinking about doing two other figures. Mainly because this guy, while he is cool and he is awesome, I kind of wanted to do a video about this guy. And then I also kind of wanted to do a video about this guy. But for some reason, Megatron just took the cake. So, with that being said, as you guys know, this is the video about Hearts of Steel Megatron. Now, I have to say that Hearts of Steel, like, I came across it probably about 6 years after it came out and fell in love with it because of all the 3P guys that were making figures, but the one that I never saw anything made of was this Megatron, which I gotta love the fact that he's a canon, because essentially this makes him a cross between Generation 1 Megatron, Galvatron, and with a little bit of unintentional Megatron X flavor, although to be fair, this guy has always been shown to be having a black paint job, and he precedes Megatron X by about 14 years. And also the fact that there were other Megatrons with the black paint job both before and after this guy. But still, I think that Megatron X flavoring is pretty much ingrained in my head when I look at this guy and see how he looks. Now, I love the fact of the giant spiked cannon wheels. And also he does have these other wheels on what will become his robot mode knees. However, it does allow him to roll rather smoothly. Now, because Megatron never actually appeared outside of like the concept art for Hearts of Steel, like he was inactive the whole deal. Starscream was running the show. So we never got to see whether this Megatron could move of his own accord, or if somebody had to get behind him and like push him around to like reposition him, like they did with G1 Megatron in gun mode, where they had to literally point him in the right direction. However, speaking of Starscream, here you can see how he looks with his loyal second, I'm just kidding, of course we know it's Starscream. He's anything but loyal. However, if you want a little bit more of that Hearts of Steel fun, here he is with Shockwave as well. And let me tell you, despite the fact that Megatron is so much smaller, it kind of makes a little bit of sense with Shockwave being a giant ironclad battleship. However, despite that size discrepancy, I do like how these boys look together. I can't deny it. However, the question has to be asked, how does he look compared to the Hearts of Steel Optimus that we already have? And you can see here that the boys, despite their small size, that kind of in this bubble that they live in, that they at least work with in scale to each other, which that's totally fine. Now, obviously, when we look at these 3P boys that we're going to be seeing later, that's obviously thrown out the window a little bit. But here you can also see how all four of the Timelines Hearts of Steel figures look together. And yeah, like this little subset, like I said, I love Hearts of Steel. So the fact that we got 4 figures based on those designs and potentially going to get a Hearts of Steel Shockwave if it's released on its own later, that would be cool either way if we get an updated version of Shockwave too. So here you can see how Megatron compares with the top 3 Seekers of the Decepticon forces. And I have to say that, yeah, I mean, obviously because this being 3P here along the back line, that's why they are so much bigger than Megatron. And I have to say that after having these guys, whenever this Starscream came out, I was just so severely underwhelmed because I'd already been spoiled by these guys. However, I am not surprised. So in case any of you were wondering if we were going to look at the Bumblebee for the set, no, this video is strictly about Megatron. However, let's see the Mad Tyrant in his robot mode. And so here is the Lord of the Decepticons reaching his robot mode, and I gotta say that I totally dig this. If you were to compare it to the art that was released in the Hearts of Steel comic book, you can see that this is a very faithful recreation of that original concept art. Now, some of the finer details on this Megatron, we always have to start off with the head sculpt. And you can see that he has those awesome red painted eyes. He still has the general style and shape of the helmet head, which is really kind of cool to see that. The thing that I really like is that on these cannon wheels, true, they become giant shoulder shields, essentially. Yeah, his field of vision is pretty much blocked. He would kind of have to do that Michael Keaton thing where he would turn around in a complete different way just to see what was to his side eventually. But you can see some of the rivet detail on there. And of course, we always like the spiked little bit right here. And then of course, I like this on the chest too, how it continues just kind of that edgy aesthetic. But even on places like his chest, you can see the rivet detail. And the stuff that we would traditionally see on a Megatron, like the control panel there on his abdomen, you can see that that detail is there, even though they have not picked it out. And then down here you can see that this bit of the arms and stuff, that is a little bit kibblesome, but I'm like, you know what, it's fine. However, if we return back to looking at some of those details, we can kind of see how his legs pan out. Again, a little bit more of that rivet detail. But overall, I think this robot mode is really, really clean for what it's going for. Now, I do love seeing him in some of his traditional Megatron poses. And one thing that I did want to go ahead and mention about these guys is that with the Timeline figures, being blast effect compatible is not really a big concern of theirs. That's not the focus of it like it is the mainline stuff. And so on Starscream, you'll see like ports like this. It's not deep enough for blast effect. And Megatron likewise doesn't support any unless you kind of force it in there a little bit. So if we have one like this, so if you wedge it in there, yeah, you can kind of make his cannon look like it's firing. Although I think for this guy, especially with this version of the fusion cannon, it would need a more appropriate blast effect. But as far as I found right now, this is the only one that will actually fit in the barrel. And so here Megatron is with his main Seeker trio. And yeah, despite the size discrepancy, it's just kind of cool to see all these guys wearing a different fit from the 1800s. It just looks so cool because it's so different from what we traditionally see. And of course, if we're going to show off our boys, we cannot forget Shockwave. And I mean, it's kind of ridiculous seeing how big he is compared to everybody else. Now, within the fiction of Hearts of Steel, guys like Starscream and Shockwave were about the same relative size. As much as I might have had a hard problem with the Devastation guys being out of scale with that Optimus Prime, for some reason with these guys, it's not as big of a deal. I don't know, maybe that's just a weird thing with me, but I'm kind of fine with it. It kind of makes it feel like Shockwave is the big, bulky bruiser of Megatron's forces. And that while Starscream may not be the biggest guy either, he kind of has two big goons that he can command to go around and do the dirty work for him, that being Skywarp and Thundercracker. So, I mean, you know, if you kind of create your own little headcanon, then you can kind of make it logically work. So basically just have fun with it is what I'm trying to say. And so it only felt appropriate to show you with these two iterations of Megatron, because he feels like he's basically just this guy, but with this guy's color scheme, and then, you know, that 1800s twist on it. And like was mentioned earlier, it is such a bold departure, because most of the time, like with this cel-shaded Megatron, or even more to the point, the modern SS86 Megatron that we've got now, that is about as far removed from this version as you can get, and I'm here for it. However, I know what you are really wanting to see. So here again is all four members of the Hearts of Steel timeline set together, and like I said, with it existing within its own bubble, I think it works pretty well. You're getting four deluxes, but the price that they charge for these being such a unique set is probably the biggest beef that I have with it overall. And as much as I love them, I don't think that they're worth that. So, you know, make your own judgments, if you will. However, basically, everybody, that's what I wanted to show you for this version of Hearts of Steel Timelines Megatron. And until next time, everybody, we will see you in another review.